Over the last 5 or so years, I've found both from the brands as well as consumers more openness when it comes to experimenting with different case materials. And one of the leading case materials that I think we've seen a bit more of as of late is titanium. But what are some of the best titanium watches? Well, in this video, we're going to be looking at some of the best titanium watches you can find on the market in 2022, looking at a variety of different price ranges in the process. So in addition to the watches that we're going to feature in this video, I will reference a blog down below looking at some of the best titanium watches. So in addition to the watches featured here, if you want even more picks, check out that down below. It'll be in the description on teddybaldassarre.com as well. And also, while you're there, definitely subscribe to our weekly newsletter where we send over different blogs and guides around watchmaking. Written content is something we're going to really prioritize this year and do much more of. So if you want to see written content come to your inbox every single week, be sure to subscribe. All right, so for this video, I want to go in ascending order in terms of price. So we'll start here with our entry-level option, a pretty good one at that, with the Zelos Mako version 3. So the main thing going for this Zelos Mako 3, and if you just know Zelos in general, they typically deliver a lot of value for the money, and that certainly is the same here. This watch comes with a 40mm case, nice lug-to-lug dimension, which will make it wear smaller. Water resistance is exceptional, but a titanium case, also having an up resistance to scratches with the increased hardness of the case. So this thing will resist scratches incredibly well in terms of where it's ranked on the Vickers hardness scale. This with an on-the-fly extension within the clasp, well done with the bracelet and just the finishing. Lume is going to be class leading, or at least right there with some of the competition. A lot is going for Zelos in this $500 price range for this titanium watch. Maybe the best value of anything out there, although Zelos as a brand, some of the designs are not going to be for everybody, but this has to be considered at this front door as one of the best options for titanium cases in the sub $500 range. Now for a more mainstream brand that utilizes titanium and maybe doesn't get considered as much for utilizing it is Citizen with their Promaster Diver Titanium. So this model here in many ways, and just Citizen in general, I think a lot of the attention goes to Seiko in this price category amongst enthusiasts, I will say, and maybe not from a mass market perspective. Citizen is a huge brand, has great distribution all across the globe, but most enthusiasts can't overlook the passive, hey, there's a quartz oscillator in this thing, but the eco drive movement that's being provided inside of here kind of just has this set it and forget it type of mentality that I think is appealing to certain types of consumers. This with the lightweight titanium case here, I think makes this one a little bit more compelling for the right type of consumer. 44mm case, but given the lug to lug and just kind of the dynamic of how that case is going to wear, very similar to that of like Samurais as well as Turtles, going to wear smaller, wears like a 42 on the wrist. Solid water resistance in that department. In regards to the lume, people just don't give Citizen enough credit for their lume. I think they are class leading. They're right there with Seiko and the Lume Bright and what they're providing. I think this is just a no-brainer dive watch if you do like the set it and forget it type of nature that comes with their eco drive movements. Now next up we have the Victorinox Inox Titanium. So if you're not familiar with this line, this mechanical option of the Inox family is, I think, one of the more robust watches for around $700 or so. It's just built like the kind of utility you would expect from a brand of Victorinox's caliber, as well as reputation in producing knives and other types of accessories. It just really falls in the mold of what many people would expect. And with the titanium version, you're getting a lot of the same elements. This is not going to have a mechanical movement, but a lot of the same upsides. This is going to be a larger watch, 43mm with the case size, lug to lug is also going to be broad, but 200 meters of water resistance, lightweight on the wrist, which is going to help with wearability. And in terms of just utility and just having a tool watch on the wrist for south of $650, I think this is another one that you could probably consider. And you're kind of getting a theme here with just the way that titanium is utilized and also just the hue of the metal itself. It kind of lends itself to being best utilized in these types of pieces that are more oriented around the tool side of things. So as you're seeing here, we're seeing quite a jump in progression in price rather quickly. That's kind of just common practice when it comes to titanium. There's not as many affordable options as you're looking at the material. But next here we have the Mido Ocean Star 200 Titanium. So this is going to be a watch that really follows the Ocean Star DNA and adapts it into a titanium format. I think this works well because many of the aspects that work for the Ocean Star and just its approach, I think mold well with what titanium has going for it as a material. It's going to be lightweight on the wrist. You have a 42.5mm case size, which with the lug to lug, the lightweight on the wrist is going to make this even wear smaller, and I think probably could be the optimal format for this case. Thin on the wrist, lots to offer in the water resistance department. And in regards to the finishing on the case and the bracelet, I think Mido, in general, they just do a nice job in rounding that out, and a nice reliable Swiss caliber on the inside. Now, Seiko typically has many options when you're talking about this $1,500 and under price segment, but when it comes to titanium, not as much of a priority for them, at least looking at their collection broadly. But here we have the SPB 189. So this is the classic Shogun design in titanium. It's an ISO rated diver. This is going to wear slightly smaller than its proposed case size, 200 meters of water resistance. It does get the automatic Seiko 6R35 70-hour power reserve movement on the inside. Bracelet does leave some things to be desired, but from a titanium diver standpoint, this is one of the more compelling options in this $1,500 price range. Probably maybe a stretch for some compared to a lot of the stainless steel offerings from Seiko, but if you do like the look of it, I think it does certainly have its audience. So now we're moving up to closer to $2,000, and I think this is where you start to get into some more compelling packages in regards to the watches and what's being showcased. And a lot of stuff under $2,000, not to say that this is always the case, but many of the offerings are like, okay, let's just take a stainless steel option and just replace it. Now I think we're getting more some individuality and also some complexity in what is being offered. And first here we have the Doxa Sub 600T. So this is a recreation of a 1980s reference that is going to maybe be a little bit unconventional, but that's kind of Doxa's DNA in a way, and features a titanium case. So you're getting some wearability like an everyday watch. 40 millimeter case, 47.5 millimeter lug to lug is going to be on the thicker side of things. Automatic SW200 movement on the inside, but 600 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal titanium case. This is not your ordinary run-of-the-mill Doxa. It's got quite a bit of love in terms of when it was first released. It does have more of this tool utility type of a backbone to it, but still has that Doxa DNA as well going in its direction in regards to the different colors that you have at your disposal, as well as just the approach with the dial. Now next up we have a pretty underrated German brand with Tutema with the M27Cs. So when I first saw this watch, it was interesting to say the least. You have this striking red dial, you have this muted tone with the titanium case, and very utilitarian approach in general that makes it feel like a creation of another brand, and a brand that I think here that many people just don't even consider. So this sign has lineage back to 2016. It follows the lineage of the Pacific Diver collection, has a large case but restrained lug to lug of 44 millimeters. It is going to wear, I would say, close to a 41 to 42 millimeter case when on wrist. And it's interesting and kind of has some connection to like the Zen U50 in regards to its approach and look. Now Tutema is a brand that has history dating back to 1927. They're a well-respected German brand. They've supplied watches for the German military in the area of chronographs, and is a brand that I would recommend doing a little bit of a deeper dive in. I have not actually really featured any of their watches prominently on the channel, but this is a watch that really gets down to the basics with that German utility. Now next up we have the Aorus Aquas in titanium. In regards to the Aorus Aquas, in many ways, I see it as that gatekeeper of dive watches at $2,000. Not to say that it's the definitive dive watch for $2,000, but if you want a baseline comparison for what a dive watch for $2,000 should at least feel like, in my opinion, I think the Aquas has to be there. This one in titanium, I think works. 300 meters of water resistance, SW200 movement on the inside. This version comes in with a 43.5 millimeter case with a lug to lug of 49 millimeters. Keep in mind, this is an integrated bracelet, so it is going to wear smaller than that on the wrist, but you're also married to the bracelet. Good news is it's actually a good one, and I don't see you actually wanting to change this out in the future. I could see maybe having some interest in going after a different strap other than the bracelet, considering it will even bring down the weight even further. Some might question, how can a polished stainless steel diver translate over to titanium? To me, I think it works. Now for the next two watches, they are from Longines, and I think they're definitively some of the best watches you can find that are made from titanium in this price segment. First being the Spirit in titanium. Now, I don't know if the premium for the titanium version will be worth it for most people. It is noticeably lighter on the wrist. You are getting some cool looks with just the dial and just how it's more of a classic pilot watch. It feels like it marries well with the hue of the case, but still, you are paying a premium compared to the stainless steel version. But that said, the Spirit is fantastic. I think these are just very impressive watches for what they're delivering in the price segment. You're getting some COSC certification for the movement, 100 meters of water resistance. It is going to wear larger on the wrist given the longer lug profile that Longines is offering here. But this is a wonderful everyday watch for this price segment. If you're trying to get into titanium as well, it just works with what the Spirit is offering up. With the bracelet too, it is slim. Like if you look at it from the side angle, you get to understand that this is not going to create this very I would say, overbearing type of experience that some bracelets can, as some bracelets almost try to overprove that they're well constructed and make this very weighed down wearing experience and kind of making things overly clunky than they should be. Certainly not a concern with this watch. Well done, refined, but still going to do the job from an everyday perspective. And then the other watch from Longines here is the Avigation Big Eye in titanium with that petroleum blue dial. Yes, you have the typical format of the Avigation Big Eye here with the larger sub-register at the 3 o'clock, but really here the star of the show has to be the grade 5 titanium case and then fusing that with that popping blue. The use of titanium with the case takes a back seat to what is happening on the dial. Some people might not like the clashing of the faux lume and the use of this very striking blue, but I think it works in this instance. And in general, this is one of the more compelling looking dials that I can think of in this price range. Longines did a fantastic job with the creation of this watch. And for a chronograph too, you're getting a column wheel Swiss-made chronograph. This is a movement that is being made exclusively for Longines. So you're not just getting a run-of-the-mill Swiss caliber here. This is almost a gatekeeper for mechanical chronographs from a Swiss perspective outside of the world of traditional value calibers from like the 7750 or 53. So even on top of the looks, the grade 5 titanium case, you also are getting a movement on the inside that is class leading for this price range. Next up, we have one of my favorite watches from the dive watch spectrum with the Tudor Pelagos here with the fixed version. So at the time of releasing this video, or the time of recording this video, I should say, there has not been word of what is going to come out at Watches and Wonders. So if this comes out afterwards and there's something new coming, then maybe this isn't the best watch to put here. But for right now, at the time of recording this video, this is really the recent creation from the Pelagos family. And although it's not going to be the Pelagos that I think most people wanted, it still is pretty cool and has its audience, no question about it. But fixed lugs are going to be questionable for some. It does create a different type of look with that. But when you actually have it strapped onto the wrist with the strap, you actually can't even tell that this is going to really even be taking place. $3,900 retail, 42 millimeter case. It is going to wear rather thin on the wrist. They did a nice job slimming down the case profile at 12.6 millimeters. Automatic MT in-house movement on the inside with a power reserve of 70 hours. Have solid water resistance here, at least adequate enough. I know the Marine Nationale connection, some people might want to be seeing the optimal use of water resistance here, but it's clearly enough for 99.9% of the market, and then also really solid lume. Dive watches for around $4,000. It's pretty busy. You have the Tudor Black Bays that are going to be very frequent here. You could also look at Breitling with some of the Super Oceans. You also will start getting into the realm of possibility for some Omega Seamasters, maybe pre-owned, or just getting into the point where, hey, there's a little bit more saving and we're there. So one of the casualties of this is going to be Tag Heuer with the Aqua Racer family, but one that I actually think is pretty cool looking is going to be the Aqua Racer Professional 300 in titanium. So the version we have here in green, I just think looks really good with that pairing of the coloration of titanium case. This is $4,200, so really in that kind of range where a lot of competition, a lot of great options. 43 millimeter case in this instance. Pretty thin though on the wrist, 11.2 millimeters, 300 meters of water resistance. And one thing that I think needs to be mentioned, you are getting a basic caliber on the inside that's going to have really minor modifications to it with an ETA base caliber inside here. Now, compared to the competition, this is just kind of falling behind. Not to say that ETA calibers are bad, but again, this is a busy price range. But from a looks department, I think this is an attractive looking watch that Tag Heuer is creating here. And I think with some modifications, probably could be more of a competitor in this range, but still certainly one to consider from the titanium perspective. Now, to me, Grand Seiko needs to be included on this list because they are probably one of the best known brands for utilizing titanium in their cases. Now, which one to include and which are the models that I think should be appropriate here? Now, you could look at, of course, the Snowflake, which I would say is probably responsible for some of the adoption of titanium in the luxury segment for a case material. But for me, my favorites are with the Four Seasons collection, looking at the SBGA 413 and 415. These, to me, I think are some of the best watches from Grand Seiko that they've made in the last 5 years. I love the look of the dials. Both of these options I think are fantastic looking. Wearable cases as well. They don't have the same high-seated type of nature when they are sitting on the wrist. They are more going to kind of taper down and sit more flat to the wrist compared to some of the other offerings, including that of the Snowflake. Wearable lug to lug, 100 meters of water resistance, 9R65 spring drive movement on the inside. They do have the Grand Seiko insignia on the back, which will cover some of that movement, but still a beautiful movement when you can get the right view and angle of it, with accuracy of plus or minus 1 second a month in terms of range of deviation. Bracelet, like many people mentioned, I think titanium actually works against what is going on from other brands, considering that the titanium with its lightweight almost makes this bracelet feel flimsy, or at least in comparison to say something like Rolex or Omega in the price segment. I think some of the hate on Grand Seiko and their bracelets is maybe a tad unwarranted, but certainly behind some of the competition. So that is one area of improvement. But from a dial, case, and just movement standpoint, these are showstoppers. I love the looks, and I think these are incredibly important pieces that outside of the Snowflake, maybe some of the more impactful pieces in the last several years from Grand Seiko. There have been several beneficiaries to Rolex and what is happening with the entry-level models from the Rolex Oyster Perpetual as well as the Explorer in this $5,000 to $7,000 range of just everyday watches. I think Omega's benefited, Grand Seiko, and another brand that I think certainly should be included here is Zenith with the DeFi Classic. This is one of my favorite everyday watches for this segment and very underrated for what it's offering. It has the look of some of these high-end integrated bracelet style watches, but certainly has its own thing going for it. One thing that's always stood out to me with this watch is just the indices and how they almost look like they're diving boards, just the way that they're cantilevered and connected to the outside perimeter of the dial. That with the faceting of those indices just creates this really entrancing and engaging visual dynamic to the watch itself. It is going to wear smaller on the wrist compared to that 41mm case size with that compact lug to lug, as well as the bracelet just really shooting down straight and draping around the wrist. I say it wears closer to that of a 40mm case, certainly wearable on a smaller wrist. Lightweight as well, 100 meters of water resistance. You also have a bi-directional date, which is pretty cool for these elite movements and a nice little small feature in the details. They do need to work on the bracelet functionality in terms of swapping it out for different bracelets. That's something that can be improved down the road, but as a lot of games are happening in this, $5,000 to $10,000 range with Rolex, this is another watch that I think is going to benefit from this and probably one of the more underrated everyday options for under $10,000. For our next watch, we're looking at Omega. There's a lot of watches that you can look at from Omega from the titanium perspective, but let's look at one that I think gets the most buzz, and that is the Omega Seamaster 300, No Time to Die. So the last watch created for the Daniel Craig era of James Bond. I was actually at the original showing of this watch, the big reveal, and I was able to see this watch right when it was initially unveiled. And I've just known about this watch for a while, and it's kind of crazy because the movie came out well after because of COVID, beyond when it was supposed to come out. So this watch kind of had a longer cycle of exposure than probably it initially was going to be intended. But still, it's a very cool watch, and I like the approach that it took. Now, some people, again, might not like the combination of the brown, the faux lume, as well as the titanium case. One of the compelling things going for this watch is the bracelet. Now, it is expensive if you actually just look at the price of the bracelet itself. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be worth it for some people, but it is very well done. And utilizing titanium and to have that fine type of mesh bracelet links, that I would imagine is a difficult feat in engineering to accomplish. You have a coaxial Omega caliber on the inside, the 8806, nice power reserve, and you could argue is probably one of the more suitable watches in the Daniel Craig era that James Bond might actually wear. Now, as you get past $10,000 in terms of price, most brands are not gonna look at titanium in any way. They're gonna look at other precious metals like a gold or maybe even something like a platinum when thinking about their watches. But there is one great example that I think is, in the last 5 or so years, one of the more compelling creations in watchmaking and an expression of true innovation, or at least having some creativity expressed in the design, and that is the Octo Finissimo. This is a watch that I know is not going to be for everybody, but you can't dismiss, even if you don't like this watch, I think it's important to just recognize what is on display here as a very innovative idea. The thickness of the case, the facets of how it's structured, this is a very dimensional type of watch and what is being created. The bracelet also and how it fuses to the case. It's unconventional, but well done for what it's going for. It's avant-garde as can be. It's refined though at the same time with this muted, just gray tone. It surprisingly just works, and it's kind of surprising because if you just heard these things out loud, like, hey, we're gonna create a watch that's this thin, it's gonna be completely gray, made of titanium, when you're imagining that in your brain, you're like, I don't know if that's gonna actually translate into something that I'd actually think is appealing. But to this, it matches, it follows the Octo case style of years prior, and I think comes together to create a very well-constructed piece that, although not for everybody, is one that I would say in the future is gonna be seen as a future classic. And again, probably not gonna be for everybody, but I would say if I had to predict how maybe in the future we're gonna look back at this watch, I think it'd be favorably, just considering how it was so different from what was popular at the time. And I think is an expression of creativity when many brands are just kind of going with what works. But all right, guys, that is my list of titanium watches today. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. What is another watch that you would consider here, made of titanium with the case, that you think is a strong consideration as well? Please leave a comment down below. Also, check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all of our new products. And definitely check out our new pre-owned pieces that are coming in every single week. Be sure to check that out. And if you're trying to sell your watch, fill out the form on the sell page, and one of my colleagues will be in touch if it's a good fit for our program. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.